Brian Pallister is the most amazing premier of all time. One time, he canceled a breakfast program for low-income kids at inner-city elementary schools in Winnipeg. And you know why? Because fuck you kids and fuck you poor people. If those kids really wanted to eat breakfast, then they shouldn't have been born poor. And they sure as shit shouldn't have been born kids. It's like they haven't even heard of bootstraps. Bootstraps. Anyway, my point was that Brian Pallister is the most amazing premier of all time, bar none.
Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow. Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow.
For years, Brian Pallister has been doing his best to privatize everything in Manitoba that isn't nailed down. This is because he's brave enough to admit what we're all thinking. Manitoba is way too stupid to own and manage its own things. That's why we need private companies to come and take control of all of our resources so they can sell them back to us for a profit. That way everybody wins, right?
Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow.
Brian Pallister dealt with COVID-19 like a fucking champ. Sure, it was more like a 6'8" creepy ghost butler of a champ, but a champ nonetheless. When COVID-19 first became a threat, Brian Pallister did what he does best. He went to Costa Rica. Then he came back and decided to start making people feel shitty for accepting help from the federal government if they were out of work due to the virus. Then he launched an ad campaign with taxpayer money to restart Manitoba, like right as numbers started to go up for real here. Then, when Manitoba's infection numbers became the worst in the country, he decided that action must be taken. Better way too late than never, I guess. But like, if those weren't the only two options, that would have been cool too. I mean, I'd rather have puke on my back than shit in my mouth, but if the option of neither is on the table, I would take that every time. Then, Brian did something truly amazing. After years of defunding and making cuts to healthcare in Manitoba, Brian Pallister had the fucking stones to ask people to volunteer as healthcare workers during a pandemic for zero compensation. Bootstraps! It turns out the frontline workers he hadn't gotten around to firing yet were feeling pretty overwhelmed. Go figure. And so, he literally and unapologetically asked Manitobans, you know, the people he was elected to protect and stuff, to volunteer during a deadly pandemic to fill the positions that he cut. That kind of leadership isn't something you see every day. And that's why he is and will always be the most amazing premier of all time, bar none.
Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow. Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow. Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow. Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow.
A year or so ago, I started writing letters to Brian Pallister to tell him what a great job I thought he was doing. After a few months of letters, it soon became clear that Brian and I were best friends and that he definitely was going to give me a job in his cabinet one day. It wasn't that he ever wrote back. He didn't. It's just that there was this palpable energy between the two of us, and I could only assume, never having had any contact with him at all, that he almost certainly felt the same. But after so many letters, I got tired of writing Brian Pallister over and over and over. So I decided to give my best friend a nickname. I settled on B-Pal. That's B-P-A-L. I think it sounds really cool, and he's certainly never complained about it.
Beep pow, beep pow, beep pow.
So as much as I love Brian Pallister, there's just one thing about him that really gets stuck in my craw. I like to get high. But Brian Pallister is very much against that. And I should clarify, I don't mean he's against him getting high. I mean he's against me getting high. He's done everything in his power to make getting high legally almost impossible in Manitoba for as many people as he can. By not allowing pot smoking in public, like even just in parks, he's effectively ensuring that anyone who lives in an apartment is left up to the mercy of their shitty landlord, many of whom have introduced zero-tolerance policies for marijuana, which, again, is a thing that is fucking legal now. So, since I like to get high, and since I love me some B-Pal, I've decided to try to introduce the two by getting high outside his house like 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe one day B-Pal will realize that not all of us stand 6 foot 8 inches high. Some of us need weed to get high. And who knows, maybe one of these days, as I'm standing on the street in front of the house with the 7-car garage, smoking a joint the size of a baby's arm, I'll look real hard and I'll see someone staring back at me. But not just anyone. The most amazing premier of the Manitoban age, bar none. Tallest thing you've ever seen. He's afraid of Halloween. He keeps his austerity in his 7-car garage. He loves crying on TV. Bootstraps are all he needs. Rosemary, 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 why didn't you do his job? B-Pal, B-Pal, B-Pal. 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 B-Pal, B-Pal, B-Pal.
Bootstraps!